Welcome back to the Brahmin Word. And we just had such a great time. Hopefully, you did as well as we walked through the creation account. And the thing that I really want to get to next is actually the plagues in Egypt. They're really fascinating. And actually, there's this kind of secret war behind the plagues going on. Whereas instead of just Moses and God versus Pharaoh, it's actually a lot deeper than that. So I won't spoil it, but it's a lot deeper than that. However, if you've gotten to know me a little bit, you will probably know what I'm going to say first. But I want to get some context going. So we're going to set the scene a little bit as we get to the plagues themselves. So we're not going to go all the way to like the end of the book of Genesis where Joseph comes on the scene and sets up his family in Egypt to survive the famine, and then they just don't leave. But it is instead, I think, a really interesting setup to start in Exodus chapter 3 with the burning bush, because this is where Moses is called to go and be the deliverer of Israel out of Egypt. So that's one thing. And then two, he also is given a call in Exodus chapter 4 that he will do signs and wonders for God, which is basically what the plagues are. And so we will get to Exodus chapter 4 next time, but today we're just going to look at Exodus chapter 3 with the introduction of the burning bush. So go to Exodus chapter 3. We're going to look at the whole entire chapter today, and we'll start in verse 1. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. All right, let's pause there. So you have Moses, who caused the death of who murdered an Egyptian in earlier in Exodus chapter 2. So we have that set up already. He's on the run, and he goes to around Midian and gets married to Zipporah. And now he is just tending sheep. He is a shepherd, but the location of the burning bush is very important and should not be glanced over. The fact that it is at Mount Horeb, which can be described as the mountain of God, is not a detail that should be passed over at all. Mount Horeb is believed to be the same mountain where in Genesis chapter 22, Abraham almost sacrifices his son Isaac. And so I'm not saying that it's on like the same exact spot. The burning bush is directly where the altar was set up. Not saying that at all. But it's on the same mountain though. And that's really interesting to keep in mind, because again, it's just this further connectivity of scripture, the idea of meta narrative, that everything is connecting with each other in this grand story that God is putting together, a grand account of redemption. And I think that's really, again, just really cool to see. But you have the angel of the Lord show up on the burning bush, but it looks just like a bush, but it's on fire, but yeah, it's not being consumed by the fire. So, of course, that would get anybody's attention, including Moses's. And so, Moses, of course, has to go see. Verse 3. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." And he said, he being God, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Um, Oh, there's some really, really cool things going on. First, I think it is kind of funny. It's like, of course, God knows that Moses is watching this burning bush. It's not like when it says, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. It's not like he didn't know he was there, but just kind of this like God is having a little bit of fun with Moses. I think that's interesting and kind of funny to see. But you have this response from Moses that we see really throughout Scripture. This where God calls to someone and they respond with here am I, here I am." You see this with Samuel and with Isaiah. So I think it's really interesting to see that pop up here, knowing what God is about to have for Moses to do, which is to go back to Egypt and to be the deliverer for God's people. Um, but then he goes into a couple things. One, showing that his presence is holy to the point where even the ground around the burning bush is holy ground, but also that he is very personable. He's not just somebody that is, uh, this God that is above everything and to be feared. He is a God that is incredibly personable. But at the same time, he's still also to be taken in awe. So when it says that Moses hid his face where he was afraid to look at God, I think there's a couple things going on here. One, I think it could be because of what he did in Egypt when he murdered the Egyptian. And so he feels unworthy to be in the presence of God. But he also may feel unworthy to be in God's presence because he lived with the Egyptians. He didn't live with the Israelites in Egypt. He lived with the Egyptians. And so I think there's a lot of guilt in Moses' heart and life at this point, that God will work to put aside as he calls Moses to be deliverer. And I say work on because it's a process, right? It's a process to let go of guilt. It's not something that's easy to do just instantaneously. But let's go to verse 7. Verse 7. Then the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" He, being God, said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." So God then shows what he is up to. Yes, he hears the sufferings of his people, but in his good timing, he has waited until this point to raise up a deliverer, which is Moses, and through Moses, he will deliver his people. Now, a lot of people have asked, okay, why couldn't God just deliver the people of Israel on his own? Could he have done that? Is he powerful enough to do that? The answer is yes, absolutely is. That's the big word that we use, omnipotent or all powerful. And so, if God is all powerful, then why couldn't he have done? Why couldn't he have gotten the Israelites out of slavery and out of captivity in Egypt? True, that is a very, very good question. But I think this is all trying to paint a picture that we need somebody to step in on our behalf, because we are sinners, because we are separated from God, because of our sin. We need somebody to step in on our behalf, to be our deliverer, to be our savior. And hopefully, you might have already made this connection. That's who Jesus is. And so for me, I think the reason why he's waiting and why he's then waiting to raise up somebody like Moses is to already start this pattern of, one, depending on God. Second, his redemption plan is far greater than we could ever imagine. Third, that his timing is way better than we can imagine, even if that might not be the case while we're going through something. And then fourth, setting up examples that lead to the ultimate sacrifice, or the ultimate life, sacrifice, and resurrection of Jesus himself. And so I think that is really, really important to see when we're talking about why didn't God just step in when it comes to getting Israel out of the country of Egypt. Great question, though. Verse 13. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. All right, so we'll take a pause right there. This is both very interesting and shows us a little bit of something, but at the same time is incredibly sad. And so here's the sad part first. It's incredibly sad that Moses even has to ask this question, because it shows that the people of Israel at this time have forgotten about God. Now, don't get me wrong, in their context, in the context of slavery and wanting to go back to or wanting to get out of slavery, I completely understand why they are they are sick and tired of their situation, but they have forgotten about who God is and about what He does, and that is the remarkable and the miraculous, and um, and they have forgotten to depend on God. That, I think, is the context of Exodus itself. Is God is not just trying to get the people of Israel to the promised land; He's also trying to get them to depend on Him above anything or anybody else. And that's, again, a very hard process to do, to the point where Israel will complain a lot of times about what God says and about what God does, even after the plagues and the Exodus out of Egypt. So I think that is really interesting to keep in mind. The other thing, but the one thing that's interesting is the I am who I am. That's the name that he gives them. And it's very vague and for a reason. We talked about this just recently, either on Wednesday nights or with a separate Broadman word. And it's the idea of, in the ancient Near Eastern culture, if you called a god or a goddess a name, you would actually have a level of authority over them. It doesn't mean that you are the god or the goddess, but you just have a level of authority because you named that god or goddess. That was very, very common thinking in this time. So when Moses asked this question, he's not trying to be malicious. It just means that God, knowing the heart of man, would probably would have thought to himself, well, I know an Israelite is going to say, well, oh, so Moses asked God what his name was, and he told him what his name was, so therefore Moses named God. That's so not the case, but that's that's the thing, that when God says I am who I am, that vague and mysterious answer, that's why he answers that way, because he wants to make it clear that there is nobody on earth that has authority over God. And I think that's just so well done. What a great answer. But then he furthers that, though, in verse 15. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. So you shall plunder the Egyptians. So God gives more details about who he is, but also what he is asking for Moses to do, and what he will do for the Israelites in Egypt. So his description is that not only is I am who I am, but he's also the God of their forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, trying to get them to remember their own history, trying to get them to remember who he is. And I think that's why he describes himself in that way, which is beautiful to see. Then he makes the promise again that they will not just leave Egypt in slavery, but they will also go to a promised land, a land that is flowing with milk and honey. And so that is where they are going. But as they will be leaving, they are going to also plunder the Egyptians in the process. And we're not going to touch on it today, but also we're going to see that Pharaoh will be very, very stubborn throughout the plagues, to the point where he will harden his heart. And that is something that we'll touch on as we go along. We're not going to spend time here, but we'll get to that once it comes up. But that is a very, very interesting discussion about what that means when Pharaoh hardened his heart, or when the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. So we'll talk about that and more once we get there. But today, thank you for just walking me through, or walking through with me. There you go. Walking through with me as we set up the plagues of Egypt with just the first part of the burning bush. And then we'll get to the second part in Exodus chapter 4 next week on Tuesday. But thanks for spending a little bit of time with me. I will see you next week on Tuesday as we continue to get closer to the first plague in Egypt. I will see you then. Thanks.